Not to start a video with a controversial yet brave statement, but 2022 was the year of forgettable games. It's not necessarily that I can't remember anything about the games I played, but that the games themselves were not memorable enough to retain without further prodding. Even some of the games on this top 5-ish list had completely floated out of my long-term memory, although I'm hoping that's not just a me issue. So, here are my top 5 but actually 6 games of 2022. Starting off in a bit of a weird niche is Sands of Salazar. If we're gonna get technical on release dates, this game was actually released in December of 2021, but I first played it in 2022, so I'm gonna count it. Regardless, this game was an ADHD haver's paradise. I'm sure the game had a story, but I often forget to progress it because the other mechanics of the game were just a constant flood of serotonin. Basically, the world is littered with towns and people, all of whom can offer repeatable radiant quests. Each quest is generally easy and quick to complete, and offers tangible in-game rewards such as items, money, increased reputations with factions and individuals, etc. While you're on the way to complete one mission, it's possible to pick up 1 or 2 or 3 more to complete along the way. Each of these is a little burst of the good brain juice, which sets the game up for a perfect cycle of completing tasks for positive reinforcement. I don't necessarily know if that's healthy, but it is satisfying as hell. Number 4 is Potionomics. I won't repeat everything I said for Sands of Salazar about completing small tasks and being quickly rewarded being satisfying, but this game also has a solid gameplay loop that constantly rewards the player and, again, gives that tasty serotonin. Other than that, the game's writing is so silly, charming, and heartwarming. The potion making also has one aspect that I love from so many video games, which is that it allows you to get better types of ingredients or materials earlier in the game and allows you to create better potions by cleverly mixing them. I love when games allow you to create better things if you choose to put in the effort. Also, the art style is charming, and it doesn't hurt that literally everyone is just so incredibly hot in this game. Starting at number 3, we get into the games that more commonly appeared on people's best of lists. At number 3 is Stray. God, what an adorable game. What's most amazing to me is that the developers made traversal so smooth. I've played plenty of games where the controls just felt more difficult or janky than they needed to be. Looking your way, Risen series. And it seemed like a 4-legged creature that's smaller than everything in the environment could have been stiff, but the developers really put their whole pussy into the controls. The other obvious aspect of this game that really got me was the story. The whole way through, I always wanted to know what was happening and where the cat would go next. Also, not to spoil it, but any ending that can squeeze tears out of me is automatically going to rank higher in my book. To me, that means that the story was developed properly, kept me engaged, and then properly executed its twist or denouement. This game was one such case, and I still get choked up when I'm watching the ending. Number 2 is Elden Ring. For people watching this, that may be a surprise because of how fantastic the game was, and for people that know, that might be a surprise because of the 200+ hours I have in the game and the challenge runs that I've done. What I will say is that I think this game had the best gameplay of the year. It also gave me the greatest sense of wonder. I still fondly remember and wish I could relive playing the game simultaneously with my partner and us sending texts to each other to the effect of, "Oh my god, I just found another new area!" Or, "Oh my god, the map just expanded even further!" I've replayed the game so many times already and absolutely cannot wait for future DLC. That said, at the end of the day, I favor a good story that can get my emotions. To that end, here is my number 1 game of 2022. Or, rather, My two games, which I have tied for number 1 because I refuse to choose. The first number 1 is God of War Ragnarok. I vacillated quite a bit between either God of War or Elden Ring being in the number 1 spot, but ultimately my decision hinged upon the emotional impact. The combat and exploration were excellent, but just a hair below that of Elden Ring. The story, though, had me hooked from scene 1. At every step, I wanted to know how the story was going to progress, and how they were going to pull the triggers on the various Chekhov's guns that had been planted since the first game, which I'd never actually played. And boy, was there some significant narrative payoff to all those seeds they'd been planting. Again, not to spoil too much, but the biggest emotional impact for me came during the scene right before the second credit roll after the scene in Svartalfheim. During that entire scene, I was crying so hard I couldn't breathe. Even for a solid 2 or 3 minutes of the credits after it finished, I was still heaving, crying, and trying to collect myself. The sign, for me, of a story well told. The second number 1 and final game of this list is Signalis. What a beautiful and confusing game that clearly stuck out to me enough to be on par with the Game Awards Game of the Year. I'll admit that I didn't understand where the story was going for the first, 80% of the game, but what kept me going is that I wanted to know. As the game neared the end, there were still plenty of questions to be answered, most of which were shrouded in metaphor, but the core story slowly started getting pieced together. I had become so invested in the character and her love for the woman she was searching for that I simply had to finish the game in no more than 2 sittings. Near the end, I remember texting my partner a picture of the last door in tears saying, "I know it's going to be in there and I don't want to open it." I wasn't entirely correct, but was heartbroken regardless. It ended beautifully, if tragic. Other than the story, the game absolutely nailed the atmosphere. From chapter to chapter, the design of the environment inspired perfect unease. All of this was occasionally interspersed with 3D polygonal cutscenes, or beautiful anime-styled images, or in-game footage, or sometimes a mix of all the various styles. Finally, the sound design was dramatic when it needed to be, and silent when it needed to be. While I respect that the gameplay and the inventory limit may not be for everyone, those were not nearly strong enough to detract from the complex and satisfyingly confusing story. So there you have my top 5-ish games of 2022. If you have any thoughts on the games, feel free to let me know in the comments. Also, if there's a particularly fantastic indie game that ended up on your Game of the Year, I would love to hear about it. Otherwise, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.